I think the last few weeks have been the strangest that I've ever experienced in ministry. First, there came the suspension of public worship. Then there came phoning round baptism and wedding couples, telling them that unfortunately their services would have to be postponed. And the real sadness of contacting funeral families, people already mourning, and telling them that their services would have to be a little bit different to what they'd anticipated, that they'd have to ask friends to stay away, and it would have to be immediate family only. And then finally came the sadness of locking up our church buildings, shutting the doors for a while, not knowing when next we could open them and worship together there. Yet in the midst of all that sadness and uncertainty, there's been real joy. There's been that beautiful week of spring sunshine and the arrival of the signs of spring. There's been dropping off Mothering Sunday flowers and blowing kisses through the window at people stuck inside and isolating. And here at the vicarage, at least, there's been an attempt at some sort of normality, trying to get everybody up and dressed and homeschooling first thing in the morning, so some kind of routine was maintained and Mum didn't entirely lose the plot every day. But yesterday would have been the first day of our holiday, so we relaxed a bit. And as the weather turned a little bit greyer and the wind picked up, we settled in to watch a film. And the film we picked was Toy Story 4, none of us having seen it before. Those of you who've already read our readings for today might be wondering where exactly I'm going with this, but bear with me, there is a point involved. And if you've never seen any of the Toy Stories, which by the way you really should because they're fantastic, the idea behind all the films is that when a child leaves their bedroom or their living room and leaves toys scattered everywhere, suddenly as the door closes, the toys come to life. In this latest film, Bonnie, the little girl who the toys belong to, starts school. And at her first session at school, she makes herself a new toy called Forky, made predictably from an old plastic fork, some googly eyes and some pipe cleaners. She names it, and when she names it, it stops being rubbish and it becomes a toy. And because it becomes a toy, it becomes something that is alive. It becomes something that can live and move and have all sorts of adventures the minute she leaves the room. And in many ways, that's exactly what we find in our first reading set for today. Utter rubbish coming back to life. In it, the prophet Ezekiel is told to prophesy to dry, dead bones lying around him. I hope you're humming, them bones, them dry bones, by the way. But anyway, he finds himself standing in a dry and barren place, surrounded by death, by old bones. Not gory things covered in flesh, but abandoned, beyond hope and beyond recognition, no longer really resembling a person at all. And he's told to speak to them. And as he obeys, those bones start to come together. And then the flesh is added. And finally comes life, the very breath of life. And those bones are revived. And God tells him that Israel has become like those bones, dry and despairing, lifeless and useless. But that despite that, God will call them back to life, back to their land, and back to the fullness of being his people. Which takes us on to the gospel reading. Mary and Martha and Lazarus are friends of Jesus. We've already met them in the gospel by the time we reach the story that we hear today. And Jesus receives word that Lazarus is ill. And those who know Jesus, who've watched him, who've been with him in his ministry, want him to get to Lazarus. They're really keen that he reaches Lazarus's house before he dies. They believe that Jesus can do something, that he can make a difference, as long as he gets there in time, as long as he gets there before the moment of death. But Jesus chooses to delay. He delays deliberately. He waits not until the point of death, but until it's been quite a while, until Lazarus is well and truly dead and buried, so that he can make a point that is undisputed. And what is that point? Well, it's the same point that we hear in the prophecy and even at a push in the story of Forky. The breath of life isn't limited. God's power isn't limited. It doesn't last just until the point of death. The love of God can overcome anything, even death. And it can make even rubbish, even stinking, decomposing human remains, as the gospel tells us Lazarus is by that point, live again. Because love and life are stronger, so much stronger than death. I think the next few weeks are going to be very difficult for all of us. I'm still praying that it won't be so, that somehow this will pass us by. But I do know that these weeks are already difficult for thousands upon thousands of people around the world, in Italy and Spain and America, and in our own country too. Those who are already sick, those who are frightened, and the many who are mourning, often without being able to say a last goodbye. And even if the closest point that we come to this virus is watching its impact on the television, still, one day we're going to reach that point when we want to cry out to God, as the prophet did. Our bones are dried up and our hope is lost. We are cut off completely. There is no hope. Or maybe we'll find ourselves crying out like Mary and Martha, Lord, you could have done something about this. You could have changed this. Why didn't you? And such pain and lament are natural and right. We wouldn't be human. We wouldn't be truly alive ourselves if we didn't feel them. It's okay to rant at God at the sadness of it all. But in the midst of fear and grief, we need to hear the end of the story. God said to Ezekiel, "Oh, my people, even these dead bones can live again at my command. I will put my spirit within you, and you shall live." Jesus called Lazarus out of the tomb to live again. But even that isn't the end of the story. At some point, he doubtless died again, and no doubt his sisters would have mourned then at their loss too. The end of the story comes a little bit later. It comes right at the end of the gospel. It's an empty tomb. It's Jesus overcoming the very power of death and opening the way to life. A life where there's no more pain and no more suffering, and where all will be well. So I pray that you'll be safe this week, that you will be well. But whatever we face, be it now or in years to come, remember the end of the story. Use Forky to remember it if you like, or hold on to the much more conventional image of an empty tomb if you prefer. But remember that there is nothing so terrible, nothing so broken, nothing so seemingly beyond hope that God cannot redeem it. Amen.